Faith. We are in week number 4 of Crazy Faith, and it has been a journey and a trip so far. If you remember, first week we talked about what it looks like to be a crazy serving kind of person, and I got to tell you, Harvester, I'm so proud of what you guys accomplished yesterday as we went all throughout Troy, Missouri, St. Charles, Missouri, all of St. Louis, Missouri to worship and serve the Lord. And so thank you so much for those of you who did that. In fact, my favorite part of yesterday was meeting those of you who were online who stepped out in person for the very first time and got to meet you face to face and not just your username. So it was really great meeting some of you. We talked about crazy serving, and then the next week, we talked about what it looks like to be crazy prayers. People who pray not just for ourselves, but pray for our city. Last week, Doyle did a great job talking about crazy generosity and what it looks like to use our finances in a way that bless people around us and bless the kingdom of God, and in turn, get blessings ourselves from that as well. Today, what I want to do is ask you to do something even crazier than what we talked about those first 3 weeks. And here's what I'm going to ask you to do today. I'm going to ask you to commit to making those 3 things part of your daily life of following Jesus. We talked about being crazy servers, crazy prayers, crazy givers, but I think some of us think that, man, if we just do those one time, then that's what God expects of us. But what God expects of us is to make that a regular part of our Christian walk with Him. That, man, I'm so proud of what we did yesterday in serving, but if we just serve one time per year at one event per year, that is not a crazy faith. That is normal. That is typical. That's what the world does. The world will serve one time. The world will pray one time. The world will give one time when their heart is moved. You know what's crazy? The people who do it regularly. And the people who have committed to doing it regularly. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And today I want to call you to a crazy faith and call you to making a crazy commitment together. So grab your Bibles, open up to Luke chapter 14. I want to read a passage here together, and then we're going to spend the rest of the message just parsing it out. But I want to read a passage here that Jesus speaks to a group of people, and he says something incredibly crazy here. He calls them to a crazy commitment. He doesn't just call them to a commitment, he calls them to a crazy commitment. And this is what it says, starting with verse 25 in Luke chapter 14. It says, "Now great crowds accompanied him," talking about Jesus, "and Jesus turned and said to them, 'If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish it, and all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king, going out to encounter another king in war, will not sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? And if not, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple." Church, that is crazy. Did you hear what Jesus was saying here? He points out 3 things here, and these are 3 challenges of commitment that I want to give us today as a church. And the first one is this. Jesus challenges them to step out of the crowd. And that's what I want to do for you today, to step out of being normal, to step out of the normal way of approaching faith, the normal way of approaching and following Jesus, step out of the crowd and become a disciple. That's Jesus' point here. He talks to this great crowd that's accompanying him. There's these thousands of people that are surrounding him, and he's calling them to step out of the crowd to become a disciple. And what he's doing is he's asking them to separate themselves into 2 separate divisions. He says, I need you to understand, are you part of the crowd or are you one of my disciples? Are you part of the crowd or are you one of my disciples? Go ahead and separate yourself into crowd and disciples. That's what he's asking them to do. Now, how do they separate themselves? How do they know whether they're just part of the crowd or one of the disciples of Jesus? You know, the difference between the crowd and the disciples is not proximity to Jesus. They were all close to Jesus. It wasn't familiarity with Jesus. They were all walking behind Jesus. They heard Jesus' teachings. They saw what Jesus did. They were familiar with Jesus. You know what separated from being in the crowd versus being a disciple? Commitment. That's what separated them. The crowd was committed to the blessings that Jesus had to offer. But you take the blessings away, and they would remove themselves from proximity to Jesus. The disciples were committed to Jesus even in the hard times. And so the question the crowd has to be asking is, how do we know if we're committed or not? We're here, we're present, we're at your church service, Jesus. How do we know that we're committed or we're a disciple? And essentially Jesus says this is how you know. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Here's Jesus' litmus test of whether you're in the crowd or the disciple. Do you hate your family? That's his litmus test, right? If you hate your family, then you're in my close group of acquaintances. You're a disciple of mine. I know what some of you are thinking right now. I hate my family. I must be the best follower of Jesus in the room. I can't stand my mom. I can't stand my husband. I can't stand my kids. They bug me to death. I must be a great disciple of Jesus. Now, the thing that you need to know here is that Jesus is using hyperbole, okay? He's really using hyperbole here. He's not saying that you have to have this ferocious anger and this vehement position towards those who are close to you. Here's what Jesus knew, though. In the Jewish culture, what took priority? God took priority. That wasn't a trick question. But second priority was family. In the Jewish culture, they held family above all else. Like, family was a place of honor. The things that mattered the most was your lineage. That's why genealogies are throughout the Bible, because they held family as like, this is my pride and joy, who I come from. They held family above their careers. If their career came against their family, they would choose family over the career. They would choose love, or they would choose family over love. That's why, like, the fathers chose the husbands for the daughters. Because the daughter would say, I want to honor my parents and honor my family, and therefore, I'm going to marry whoever you choose for me to marry. I'm trying to get my daughters, by the way, to go along with this. Not sure it's going to work. But the Jewish people, they put family above career, above money, above duty, above love. And Jesus comes along and says, that's not bad, but I need to be above all of it. If you're going to be my disciple, if you're going to follow me, you got to step out of the crowd. The crowd loves other things more than they love me. If you're going to be my disciple, you have to put me so far above those things that gap seems to appear that you don't even enjoy those things. It's not that you hate them, it's not that you treat them poorly, but it's the way that we honor God, the way that we honor Jesus is so far above those things that the vastness of that gap appears that we're not even concerned with those. And so Jesus' point wasn't to hate, but Jesus' point was a point of value. That whatever you value the most in life, put me far above that. And so, church, one of the crazy things I want to call you to is not to hate your family, but I want you to consider what is the thing in your life that you value the most. For a Jewish context, it was family, and for some of us, it's family still, that we value family the most in life. What I'm going to ask you to do is put Jesus above all of that. What do we value in our culture? We typically value money as one of the things that we value in the American culture, in the suburban culture especially. We say, man, money is something I value. I'm going to build my life around getting more and more, build my career around getting more and more. Well, church, what Jesus is saying is that when the IRS looks at how you've given your money away, they should think you hate your paycheck. That's what Jesus is saying. Like, you give so much to other people and helping other causes that they're asking, does this person even want a paycheck? Why are they giving their money away? Or when somebody looks at your calendar, like if I looked at what you did this last weekend, what would I assume you value the most? Jesus is saying, you've got to put me above everything else. Some of you families who are into sports and your kids are into sports, or some of you teenagers who are into sports, I got a question. Does your coach think that you value Jesus above the team? Does the coach ever ask you this question? Why do you keep missing practice? Why are you not going to the games on Sunday? Do you hate this team? No, maybe you love the team, but you just love Jesus so much more. What Jesus is asking us to do is to step out of what the crowd does and step into a committed relationship with Jesus. And the biggest difference between the crowd and a disciple was that the crowd wanted to be blessed by Jesus, but wasn't interested in sticking with him. You know, if I was to put it in a more crude way, I would put it this way. The crowd wanted to be in bed with Jesus without being committed to him. And the Old Testament actually uses that analogy a lot, that we want to be in bed with God. We want to be in bed with Jesus, but we want the blessings of that, but we don't want to be committed. And Jesus says, if you like it, you better put a ring on it. That's what makes you a disciple. Like, if you want to follow me, you've got to make the commitment to it. Some of you are like all about that. But here's the thing. Jesus calls us to step out of the crowd and into this commitment, but what he does first is say, hey, before you put a ring on it, count the cost of the ring. Know that the ring is going to cost you something as well. And so the second thing he lets this crowd know is that they need to count the cost. They need to count the cost. He goes on to say this. He says, whoever does not bear his own cross, you know what it's going to cost you to follow Jesus? The cross. You're going to have to bear your own cross as well. You know what the bridge is from being in the crowd to being a disciple? The bridge that if you're going to step out of the crowd into discipleship, it's you bear the cross of Jesus. That there's a sacrifice that comes with following Jesus. It's not just about attaining blessings. It's about renouncing some of those blessings for the benefit of Jesus and the benefit of others. And Jesus tells them, there's a cost to it. Bear your own cross and come after me. If you don't, you cannot be my disciple. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began a build and was not able to finish it. Essentially what Jesus is saying is, don't be like some of the men in this room who starts projects and have to keep running back to Home Depot and realize they don't have enough money to do it. Like, count the cost before you go and jump in, because it's gonna cost you something. And don't be surprised when it costs you something. We have to count the cost. An example from my own life comes from my middle school daughter, Ara. She right now is trying to convince me to get a puppy for our house. Like, we are a no-pet family. Like, we do not have any animals or pets. But she is on this mission for like the last 6 months to convince us to get a dog for our home. Any dog people in the room? Yeah? Now let me ask another question. How many of you have counted the cost and know it's not worth it? All right, so it's me and like 2 of you. Okay. Like, she's like, Dad, it's gonna be worth it. Like, every time we pass by like a person walking a dog on the road, she's like, look how happy that person is with the dog, Dad. We could be that happy. Or she'll go over to her friend's house and play with her dog, and then she'll send me text messages of her cuddling with the dog. Look how happy I am, Dad. Don't you want me to be happy? I'm like, I want us to be happy, but I've counted the cost. And I know that a dog isn't something that I'm willing to commit to. Like, a dog looks cute in a picture. It's really cute for the first day, and then it chews up everything you own. I'm not sure I'm committed to that. Or it has hair everywhere. Like, I've got 3 girls with a lot of hair. I already have enough hair all over my home. I don't need to add another hairy dog to the mix, okay? Like, I've counted the cost. Our drains can't handle any more hair. Dogs, they poo everywhere. I have a 6-year-old son who does that. I don't need a dog that I've counted the cost, and I've realized that I'm just not cut out for that. But my daughter, she looks at all that and she says, you know what? That's something I'm willing to commit to. And so, you know what I'm gonna do? When she's an adult, I'm gonna allow her to commit to that when she gets her own home. But the thing is, many of us, we have this idea and this vision of what it's gonna be like to follow Jesus, and that it's gonna be all waggly tails and walking dogs. But Jesus says, there's a cost to following me, and that cost is the cross. Are you willing to pay the price of following me? And I think some of us, we start out in our fellowship of Jesus thinking that we're ready until a hardship comes along. And then we renounce the cross and we back away from Jesus and say, I just wanted the blessings. There's a physicist named Robert H. Goddard. He was the inventor, and he was credited with creating the world's first liquid-fueled rocket, and it ushered in the era of space flight. And people told him that he would never be able to do this. We'd never be able to get to space. We don't have rockets that can do this. And he did it, and this is what he says about what kind of pushed him along. He says, the reason people fail is not for lack of vision, but for lack of resolve. And resolve is born out of counting the cost. You know where he got that from? He got that from our Messiah, Jesus. And I love what he's saying here. He says, like, people have visions of getting to the moon. Like, we as a church have visions of winning our city to Jesus. Jesus has this humongous vision for transforming and changing the world. And our problem isn't that we don't see the vision of Jesus. You know what our problem is? We see the vision, we just don't have the resolve. We haven't counted the cost and determined that the cost was worth the sacrifice. I think we have the vision of Jesus, but the thing that's holding us back is that we haven't sat down and asked ourselves in front of Jesus, Jesus, what is this going to cost me? What is this going to cost me? One of the things that I would highly recommend every single person here doing is sitting down and budgeting your life. I know many of us, every paycheck, what do? We sit down and we budget where we're going to spend our money, and the most important things we deal with first. We pay those most important things. We give to others. We pay our mortgage. We pay off our bills. And then what's left over, that's what we play with. But I don't think many of us have actually done that with our life in Christ. I think some of us, we need to sit down with Jesus, sit down in prayer, sit down with the scriptures and say, Jesus, what part of my life do I need to give over to you first? Like, help me count the cost. When's the last time you sat down and said, Jesus, I don't just want to, on occasion, give some time to serve at an event, but Jesus, I believe that you've called me to live a lifestyle of service. So as I look at my week, where am I going to budget my life and give my life over to somebody else? How am I going to do that with prayer? Like, Jesus, you've called us to do more than just pray one time when things are getting difficult. What does it look like to budget my day, to budget my life, and say, Jesus, this first part of my day, this first part of my week, it belongs to you. I'm giving it to you first. And if something else tries to come and take that away, I've already budgeted it to you and it's going to you. Jesus, my mornings belong to you. My Sundays belong to you. I'm giving that to you first. How many of us have sat down instead of just saying, I'm going to give financially whenever my heartstrings are pulled, and said, Jesus, no matter what comes, this is the percent that I'm going to give over to you. And the thing that we need to do is we need to sit down and actually have that conversation with Jesus, maybe sit at the table and have that conversation as roommates or as families or as fathers, and have that family conversation over our household. And when you do that, just a note, you need to understand that Jesus isn't asking for a one-time purchase. He's asking for a lifetime subscription. Jesus isn't asking you just to serve once and to budget one day to serve. He's asking for that to be a regular part of who you are. He's not asking you to pray once at dinner time. He's asking you to make that a part of who you are. He's not just asking you to give one time a year. He's asking you to make that a part of who you are. In Luke 9, a few chapters before this passage we're reading, Jesus says, when you take up your cross daily, that's what it is. It's a daily taking up. Don't just take up your cross once, but if you're going to follow me, take up your cross daily and commit to me. And in our commitment, this is the third thing that he tells us, is that we're not just committing to sacrifice. Ultimately, you know what we're committing to? We're committing to the outcome. We're committing to the outcome of where Jesus is going. We have this vision of where Jesus is going, and so what we commit to is not necessarily to making sacrifices, but we say, Jesus, I'm so committed to this world changing. I'm so committed to you healing my family. I'm so committed to people meeting you that I'm willing to make the sacrifice right now before I even know what the sacrifice is. And so Jesus tells the crowd, he says, therefore, any of you who does not renounce all, renounce everything that's in your life, everything that's in your possession, to say, Jesus, I renounce this. He says, until you do that, you can't really chase after where we're going. Now, here's what Jesus isn't asking you to do. He's not telling you to get rid of everything in order to follow me. But he's saying you need to speak a word over this to say, if Jesus asks for this, you now belong to Jesus. My job. If Jesus asked for my career, job, you belong to Jesus if it comes to that. My time, my finances, my relationships, my schedule, I renounce it all to give it over to Jesus. But the thing is, I think we're so committed to the way that things are right now that it's hard for us to commit to the outcome of the future. We're so committed to what is, when I think we should be more committed to what could be. But we find ourselves in the balance between those two, don't we? We're like, but I love the way my life is right now. I've got everything. I'm so cozy and comfy. If I give anything up, what if my life tanks? What if things get worse? Can I tell you, if you put something into the hands of Jesus, it will only make it better. Anything you have in the hands of Jesus is better. And so Jesus says, I know you're committed to what is. I've given you what is. Will you be committed to what could be? And so that's the question I have for you, Harvester. Are you satisfied with the way that things are? Are you satisfied with the way that things are? Because if you are, if you're satisfied with the status quo of your household, if you're satisfied with the status quo of the shape of our society and of our culture, if you're satisfied with the things that are happening into this world, then we're done. Like we've achieved it. We don't need to serve more. We don't need to pray more. We don't need to give more because we've already achieved what is. But can I tell you, I'm not satisfied with the way that things are. You know, walking around and talking to some of you yesterday and just hearing your stories as we engaged in service together, I think God has more for some of you. I think he has healing for you. As I drove around St. Charles and as I think about Troy and I think about Ferguson and St. Louis, I think God has more for our city. I think there are more lost people who need to find Jesus. I think there are more found people who need to follow Jesus. And I got to tell you, I'm not satisfied with what is. And so we have to be willing to let go of what is so that we can commit to what could be. And I got to tell you this. My family and I were committed to what could be. It's been 4 weeks today that Doyle has said, Nikomas, here's the reins. 4 weeks and I haven't burned the place down. I'm so happy about that. But Doyle's here just in case I do. Like things still exist, but I gotta let you know, but before we said yes to Jesus about this position of being lead pastor over our campuses, our family had to count the cost. Because I've seen what Doyle has had to go through and the burden that Doyle has had to bear for Harvester Christian Church and the gospel. And the pain that it's been on him personally, not just this last year, but leadership. And I've seen what Gene has had to put up through. And the part of the question I'm asking him and asking my wife is like, do we want to carry that burden? Like we're kind of happy with what is in our life. But then we see what Jesus could do. And so we sat at our table as a family and said, this is going to be hard on you kids, and I'm so sorry about this. It's going to be hard on our marriage, and Rachel, I'm so sorry about this. But where I put Jesus and what I believe Jesus could do and what we believe Jesus can do, we're not just committed to what is, we're committed to what could be. Our staff, our pastors, our elders are committed to what could be. Many of you in this room, you've shown that you're committed to what could be. And so now those of you who are still waiting in the crowd, before we take another step forward as Harvester Christian Church and into whatever God has next for us, the question I have is, will you step out of the crowd? Will you count the cost? And then will you commit to the outcome? Jesus has got some huge things for this city, and I want you to be a part of it. And I want to know who you are. And so here's what we're going to do. We've got a commitment card that I've given every single one of you as you walked in. If you don't have one, there's some more at the back of the room. For those of you online, we're going to put a link in the chat where you can click on that link and be taken to the online commitment card. And what I want you to do is in this moment, I'm going to give you just a little bit of time to pray. And maybe you want to pray together as a family, or you want to pray together with someone sitting next to you. You can pray out loud. You can talk with them if you want to. You can make this commitment together if you want to. But what I want you to do is commit to having a crazy faith, a faith that's not typical, a faith that doesn't just serve once, pray once, and give once, but a faith that for the decades to come is continually serving, continually praying, continually giving to what could be in the future. So on that card, what I'm going to ask you to do is check a box in each one of these. Or maybe you're like, I've counted the cost and I'm not ready to buy the dog. That's okay too. But maybe you want to say, serving regularly, today I'm going to start and commit to figuring out what it means to serve regularly at Harvester Christian Church. So click that start button. Or maybe you're here in this praying regularly. You're like, I've been praying regularly, so I'm going to continue praying regularly for those outside of this church. Not just my family, but for those people that we served in those organizations that we served yesterday, and praying for my neighbors, praying outward. Maybe you want to click or check continue praying regularly. And giving regularly. Maybe you're like, I give regularly and faithfully, and so I'm going to continue giving regularly and faithfully at Harvester Christian Church. Maybe you want to check that box. Or maybe today you're like, you know what? I haven't been serving regularly, so I'm going to start today. I'm going to commit to figuring out what that means. I'm going to start today praying regularly for our city. I haven't been giving. I only give once in a while. And so today I'm going to commit to starting to give regularly. And then put your name on it. Because I want to know, like, who's not in the crowd anymore. Like, I see the crowd. What I want to know is who's the disciples of Jesus who are stepping out to commit to this regularly. And if you'll do that, and if you'll fill out the information on the back, I just want to send you a letter and say thank you and welcome to the team, and how excited I am about what's going to happen next. But before you check anything, let's take a moment to count the cost. Take some moment to pray, and then I'm going to ask you to commit. And then hold on to that card. I'll let you know what to do with it next. This is your time to pray.